My 29F husband, 32M, hid his gambling addiction by pretending to be a day trader. Now our savings are gone and he says I should have noticed sooner. When I met James, I was blown away by how confident he was. Not arrogant, just quietly assured, like a man who knew where he was going in life. He had this magnetic energy that made me feel like I could trust him with anything. When we got married, I was proud of the life we were building. We had a modest apartment, joint savings, and he was doing what he called day trading, which always sounded fancy and too complex for me to question. I work full-time in HR, and I've always been the type to just let people manage their own areas. James said he had his system, his strategy, and that I didn't need to worry. And I didn't, for a while. He'd always been a little tight-lipped about the details, but he explained it away as just protecting the process. He claimed there were too many amateur traders online who'd copy strategies and tank the market. I don't know. It sounded silly, but I trusted him. We had a shared spreadsheet where I tracked our monthly expenses and he'd occasionally input his earnings, usually vague things like, plus $2,300 net this month, or -500 fluctuation, normal. It always balanced out to enough. We had $38,000 in savings at one point. Not bad for a couple without kids yet. Then weird things started happening. Packages for computer accessories started arriving at our place, headsets, webcams, keyboards, all fancy. He said they were for his trading setup, because the market moved fast and he needed multiple monitors. I figured, okay. He was still paying his half of rent, and we weren't struggling. I did start to notice we were going out to eat less, and he was a little twitchy sometimes at night. But I chalked it up to market stress. I mean, people lose sleep over stocks, right? But then my credit card got declined during a grocery run. I checked my app, and my checking account, which had always been our spending account linked to both of us, was overdrawn. I assumed it was some kind of fraud. I texted James and he said, "I'll take care of it, just a glitch." He Venmo'd me $60 immediately and said not to stress. I let it go. But a week later, I found out he'd pulled $10,000 from our joint savings without telling me. That was the first real crack. I confronted him that night. I came home early, and I didn't even wait for him to take his shoes off. I showed him the transaction history from our bank app and said, "You transferred $10,000. That's not a glitch." He barely blinked. Just rubbed his face and said, "It's tied up in some positions right now, but don't worry, I'll double it. Triple it, even." My heart sank. It was the way he said it, like it was no big deal, like I didn't just watch months, years, of savings evaporate with a single click. "What positions?" I asked. "What exactly are you doing? I want to see it. Show me your trades." That's when he got defensive. He said I was being controlling, that I never trusted his process, and that he couldn't just have me breathing down his neck every time the market dipped. I kept pressing. I told him I deserved to see what was happening if our joint savings were being used. He said I wouldn't understand. That stung more than I expected. That night I barely slept. I started going through everything, credit card statements, old bank records, even our Venmo history. And there were gaps. Whole weeks where thousands would vanish, labeled as trading capital or exchange fees. But I started noticing patterns. Payments to sites I didn't recognize, PayPal transfers to what looked like gambling platforms, and worst of all, cash withdrawals. Massive ones. $3,000 here, $5,000 there. All in the last 6 months. I didn't want to believe it at first. I told myself maybe he was doing crypto stuff or using offshore exchanges. Maybe it was still legit. But then I found the Reddit tabs open on his browser. Posts on sports betting subs, parlays, online poker forums. One even had a post from him, under a burner account, venting about losing 20 grand in 3 weeks, and not knowing how to tell my wife. That was the moment I knew. He wasn't a day trader. He was a compulsive gambler. And I'd married someone who had been lying to me every single day. I didn't say anything right away. I sat with that information for 2 days, trying to decide what to do. I couldn't eat. Couldn't focus on work. I kept replaying every conversation we'd had over the last year where he'd mentioned his market wins, or warned me not to pull money from savings because he had a big move planned. It all felt so fake now. So calculated. He had built this elaborate lie, calling himself a day trader, sharing made-up stock tips with my brother, even showing me fake charts on his laptop once. I'd been so blind. When I finally confronted him with the gambling evidence, he just stared at me like I'd broken some sacred rule. "Why were you snooping through my browser history?" he asked, like that was the violation. I lost it. I yelled. I cried. I asked him how he could do this to us, how he could gamble away our emergency fund, our vacation savings, everything we put aside for a future. He didn't deny it. Not once. He just shrugged and said, "I thought I'd win it back before you ever found out." And when I asked why he lied about trading, he actually said, "Because it sounded better than, I bet on sports all day. You wouldn't have stayed with me if you knew." That's when I realized how deep it went, not just the gambling, but the manipulation. He had crafted this persona not just to hide the addiction, but to maintain control. To make me feel like I didn't need to ask questions. Like I didn't deserve to know. And when I asked about the rest of the money, about the $15,000 we had set aside for IVF treatments next year, his face just crumpled. He looked down and whispered, "It's gone." Everything broke inside me. That money was our chance. Our shot at starting a family. And it was just gone. Not spent on medical bills or an emergency. Gone to DraftKings and online poker rooms. The worst part. He looked at me and said, "You should have noticed sooner." Like this was somehow my fault. Like I hadn't been trusting and supportive and patient to a fault. Like I had let him do this. That sentence hasn't stopped echoing in my head since. I couldn't sleep that night. I just laid there in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe beside me like everything was fine. My brain was a war zone. Half of me wanted to scream and shake him awake and demand he fix everything, make it all right again. The other half just felt hollow. Like the man I married had already disappeared months ago and I was only now catching up. The next morning, I packed a bag and went to stay at my friend Jasmine's place. I told him I needed space, and he didn't fight me on it. No apologies. No begging. Just a quiet, "Okay. Let me know when you're ready to talk." That almost made it worse. Like he thought I was overreacting. Like this was just a bump we'd laugh about someday. Jasmine was the one who convinced me to go through our financials in detail. We sat at her dining table with my laptop and slowly logged into every account I could think of, savings, checking, credit cards, my Roth IRA. It was worse than I imagined. We weren't just drained, we were in debt. He'd maxed out one of our joint credit cards with cash advances and transferred balances between accounts to keep me from noticing. It was all so methodical. So planned. I called my bank and flagged the accounts. Changed my direct deposit to a new solo checking account. Froze my credit. I felt like I was cleaning up after a storm I never saw coming. But what hit hardest wasn't just the money. It was the betrayal of trust. I had defended him to my parents when they asked why we weren't buying a house yet. I told friends he was doing great with his investments. I turned down promotions so I could work part-time and focus on starting a family, with a man who was secretly bleeding us dry for dopamine hits from online roulette. I started therapy that week. My therapist helped me name what I was feeling: grief, betrayal, resentment, shame. She also pointed out something I hadn't considered. That gambling addiction is a disease, but enabling it, covering for it, or pretending it doesn't exist helps no one. And that I was under no obligation to fix this for him. Still, some part of me kept hoping he'd show up at Jasmine's door and fall to his knees, tell me he'd joined a recovery program, that he'd do whatever it took to earn back my trust. But instead, I got a text that said, "I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. It's just money." That text broke something in me. I stared at it for a long time, reading it over and over, as if maybe it would change. As if my phone was broken and had scrambled the words. But no. That was exactly what he wrote. It's just money. Like I hadn't spent years budgeting, saving, planning. Like I hadn't given up so many things, travel, hobbies, a promotion at work, because I believed in our shared future. I didn't reply. I couldn't. What was I supposed to say to that? That, just money, was the roof over our heads, our future children's college funds, our retirement. That, just money, represented years of careful planning and compromise. He'd spent it all on a lie, and now he was acting like I was the one being dramatic. A few days later, I went back to the apartment when I knew he'd be at work. I took only what was mine, my clothes, my books, the jewelry my grandmother left me. I didn't want to be accused of stealing anything. Jasmine helped me load it all into her car and never said a word when I started crying in the elevator. She just squeezed my hand and said, "You're stronger than you think." I filed for a legal separation the next week. And that's when things really started to unravel. Because suddenly, my husband, this man who had shrugged off my pain like it was inconvenient, flipped a switch. He started calling me non-stop, sending long emails about how he panicked and didn't know how bad it had gotten, how he needed me to come home so we could fix it together. He said he'd started attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings, that he was reading self-help books, that he'd even spoken to his older brother about going into a rehab program. For a moment, I wavered. Not because I believed him, but because I wanted to believe him. I missed the man I married. I missed the safety I used to feel. But every time I got close to picking up the phone, I remembered that text, "It's just money." No apology. No ownership. No empathy. Just deflection and gaslighting. And then my mom called me crying. She'd found out from a friend that my husband had borrowed $5,000 from my dad a few months earlier, told him it was to invest in a guaranteed stock. My dad never told me because he didn't want to interfere in our marriage. He just assumed I knew. So I called my husband. I told him I knew about the loan. And do you know what he said? "Your dad offered. I didn't even ask. That's on him." I hung up. That was the moment I stopped grieving the man I thought I married. That was the moment I realized I didn't lose him to gambling, I lost him to himself. The worst part wasn't losing the money. It was realizing that the man I built a life with had been lying to me for years, not just about the gambling, but about who he really was. It was like waking up next to a stranger, except the stranger knew all your secrets, all your weaknesses, and had used them against you to keep you in the dark. Over the next week, I started untangling our finances. I got my own bank account, froze our joint credit cards, pulled my name off anything I could. That's when I saw just how deep it went. He'd taken out 2 personal loans in his name and maxed out a credit card I didn't even know existed. The worst part? He had listed me as an emergency contact on both loan applications, like I was complicit in his lies. I tried talking to his family, hoping someone would help him see reason, maybe get him into serious treatment. But most of them brushed it off, saying things like, "He's always been a little impulsive," or "He'll land on his feet." One of his cousins even told me, "All men have vices, at least it's not cheating or drinking." I had to bite my tongue not to scream. Then, about a week later, I got a message from someone I didn't know, a woman named Tessa. She said she was in one of his online trading groups, and she reached out because he'd gone quiet and owed people money. Apparently, he had convinced some of them to pool funds into a short-term investment he swore was going to triple in days. He lost everything. And now he was ghosting them. I told her I had filed for separation and that I wanted nothing to do with any of it. She thanked me and said, "I don't know how you stayed married to him this long." The truth is, neither do I. But I also know that when someone lies to you in slow, subtle ways, you stop trusting your own gut. You think, it's not that bad, or maybe I'm overreacting. I thought I was being a good wife. Turns out, I was just being a convenient one. The funny thing is, through all this, he still hasn't admitted to gambling. He keeps calling it market research or investment strategy gone wrong. He tells people I overreacted and left him when he needed me most. But let me tell you something, he didn't lose me because of the money. He lost me because when everything came crashing down, he didn't ask for help, he hid, he blamed, and he gaslit. And I finally realized that I was never his partner. I was just his cover story. Update 2. I didn't plan to post an update, but a lot has happened since I last wrote, and honestly, I need to get it out. After filing for separation, I moved into a small rental with help from a friend. I started therapy too, not for him, but for myself. It felt like I had been living in a fog for years, and now I was finally seeing everything clearly. He, on the other hand, spiraled. It started with messages, first angry, then apologetic, then manipulative. He said I was abandoning him, that I owed him one last chance, that I was ruining his reputation by airing our dirty laundry. When I didn't respond, he sent me a long email blaming his gambling on the stress of trying to provide for us. He wrote, "If you had paid more attention, you could have stopped me." That line nearly broke me. Not because I believed it, but because it proved how little he had changed. Then came the final straw. He showed up at my job. I work in a mid-sized company in a shared office space. One afternoon, reception called up and said my husband was downstairs, refusing to leave unless he saw me. I was mortified. I had to sneak out the back to avoid a scene. That night, I filed for a restraining order, not because I was scared for my safety, but because I needed to draw a firm line. I had to make it clear that my life was no longer his to trample through. That move finally got through to him. He stopped contacting me. But then I started getting messages from mutual friends, even a couple of his relatives. They wanted to know why I was being so dramatic, why I was punishing him instead of helping him get better. Apparently, he'd told them I overreacted to a few bad trades and abandoned him while he was depressed. I didn't respond to them. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone anymore. What I did do was meet with a financial advisor and a divorce attorney. I wanted a clean break. The advisor said it might take years to rebuild my credit and savings, especially since we had joint accounts on record. But I'll take years of rebuilding over another year of lies. What hurt the most was thinking of all the times I covered for him. All the times I believed his excuses. He never took responsibility, not once. And when he realized he couldn't control the story anymore, he tried to twist it until I looked like the villain. I'm not the villain. I'm just the one who finally said, enough. The divorce process itself was exhausting, financially, emotionally, logistically. Because we didn't have children, I naively assumed it would be quick and clean. It wasn't. He contested almost every point. The house, even though we had to sell it to cover debts, the last bit of savings in our retirement account, which I had to prove he'd already emptied, and even the furniture we got as wedding gifts. He claimed I was being vindictive for not letting him take what he wanted. What really caught me off guard was how skilled he was at playing the victim. He cried in mediation, told the mediator he was trying his best, that he was sick, and I was just cold and punishing. It was chilling to watch him manipulate the room like that. But I held my ground, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I had nothing left to give. Not my forgiveness, not my time, not my savings. There was one point during mediation where he looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're throwing away 8 years over a mistake." A mistake. Like the hundreds of thousands of dollars he drained from our future was a misplaced text or a forgotten birthday. That moment sealed it for me. I felt nothing. Not anger, not love, not regret. Just emptiness. He wasn't my husband anymore. He was a stranger. After weeks of pushing back and forth, the divorce was finalized. I walked away with my name, my car, and the tiniest of safety nets left in a private account I'd started 2 months before everything exploded. He moved back in with his parents, or so I heard. I blocked him everywhere, even on LinkedIn. I didn't want any reminders of him sneaking back into my life when I least expected. Therapy's been the one constant in all of this. My therapist helped me see that I'd been gaslit for years, not just about the money, but about how little of myself I was allowed to keep in that marriage. I was always the one compromising, bending, absorbing the stress so he didn't have to feel uncomfortable. And every time I voiced concern, he convinced me I was imagining things. Now, I don't bend. I don't apologize for protecting myself. I'm learning to exist without fear. To check my bank account and not feel sick. To walk into a room without rehearsing 100 fake smiles. I've reconnected with old friends. I've started working out again. I signed up for a weekend painting class even though I'm objectively terrible at it. And I've been able to sleep through the night, for the first time in years. There's still grief, but it's a quieter kind now. Like background noise. And every day, it gets softer. Update 3. A few weeks ago, I got an email from his sister, someone I used to be close with. She said he was going through it, that he'd lost a lot of friends, and asked if I might be willing to talk to him again. Not to fix things, just to hear him out. I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I no longer owed him closure. I gave everything I could while I was in that marriage, my love, my money, my time, my faith. He set it all on fire, and now he wanted to warm his hands by the ashes. No. The last piece of this whole story happened just a few days ago. I found a folder on my old laptop, one I hadn't opened in years. It had videos from our early marriage, vacation clips, Christmas mornings, lazy Sundays. I watched a few. And for the first time, I didn't cry. I didn't rewind or linger on a smile I thought was genuine. I just watched, then quietly deleted them. Not out of bitterness. But because I'm done carrying things that no longer belong to me. It's strange how healing doesn't always feel like fireworks or triumph. Sometimes it's just deleting a video without emotion. Saying no to an email. Letting silence be the answer. Sometimes it's sleeping through the night and waking up without dread in your chest. Sometimes it's looking at yourself in the mirror and finally seeing someone you're proud of. I'm not the same person who used to stay up till 2 a.m. worrying about what fake investment report he was going to show me next. I'm not her anymore. And that's the best thing that's come out of all of this. What do you think? Tell us in the comments. Like the video and hit the subscribe button for more Reddit stories.